Thanks everybody for checking in. The theme of the two previous talks has been Ulster chaplains. This one's Irish Catholic Chaplains. There are some Ulster men in it, and some men with Ulster connections. And this presentation is based on some of the research that I've carried out on Irish Catholic chaplains in the Great War for a forthcoming book, which is being compiled by a local man. He's quite an elderly gentleman. He's not very internet savvy, and I'm doing all his research for him. The research has been somewhat of a voyage of discovery for me, as I knew very little of this area before it started. But as you know, in this business, every day is a learning day. What I did find was the chaplains were in the main exceptionally brave men who intentionally put themselves in harm's way to assist the wounded and the dying. Another wry quote from Father John Gwen SJ. Now, you'll come across abbreviations. SJ is Society of Jesus. He's a Jesuit. As I go through the presentation, there's other abbreviations and I'll explain them as I come to them. John Gwynn was born at Youghal, County Cork, in 1866. His father was a sergeant in the army at Youghal Barracks. I wasn't able to identify what battalion he was with. He entered the Society of Jesus in 1884. He was a teacher at Mungret College, which is a Jesuit school in Limerick pre-war. However, he was totally ill-suited to teaching and he detested it. And he saw the war as a way out. And he wrote to his superior in August 1914 and he stated, "I'm writing to press earnestly my request to be sent as a chaplain to the war. I'm doing so as I am suffering terribly from headaches and nervous depression, which I feel sure will not stand another year's teaching at Mungret." Rather rash decision to head from teaching to the war. But anyway, he was appointed chaplain to the Irish Guards in November 1914 and he became a new man. Major in the 1st Battalion wrote, "At the worst place would be found Father Gwynn, always ready to help the wounded or to administer to the dying." He was killed by shell fire near Batoon on the 1st of October 1915, aged 49. When news reached Mungret College, a colleague there wrote, "Poor fellow, the Lord has finally solved all his difficulties and granted him the death he himself would have chosen in preference to any other." Well, there's a man who basically found his true vocation. Okay, we bit of history. Chaplain is derived from the Italian word capellani. Capellani translates as those who guard the cappa or the cloak. The gentleman, as you see in the picture on the horse, is St. Martin, who's the patron saint of the chaplains. He was a soldier from what is now Hungary. He left the army to follow Christ and is said to have cut his cloak, as you can see in the picture, to share with a poor beggar. And chaplains have been with military campaigns throughout the ages. The Crusades were accompanied by priests. The English army at Agincourt had 32 chaplains attached to it. It wasn't formalised until 1796, when the Anglican chaplain general was appointed to control chaplains, who were almost all Church of England. Catholic chaplains were not recognised by the War Office until 1836, and Methodists not until 1881. In the Crimean War, there were 21 chaplains served, which 7 or 33% of them died mostly of sickness. And priests were sent to field forces from the entire spectrum of the priesthood, from diocesan priests and from orders. The guy will come across a Carmelite, Simon Stockton. He was attached to the 6th Enniskilling Dragoons in the Boer War. And those from orders like Carmelites and Franciscans and Benedictines, they tended to be the first to be attached due to they all had a missionary role, so they tended to be the first to be attached to military campaigns. And here's the two most important men as far as Irish Catholic chaplains were concerned. Catholic military chaplains throughout the British Empire came under the control of the Bishop of Southwark in London, except for Ireland, where they came under the control of Irish bishops. The gentleman on the left is Cardinal Francis Bourne. He wasn't Irish, but he had an Irish mother. He was the Bishop of Southwark in 1896, and he was appointed Archbishop of Westminster in 1903, when he took the chaplain's portfolio with him, so he moved from Southwark to Westminster. And you can maybe tell some of his character from his photograph, but one of his own bishops said, "He's an autocrat of the most Prussian type, who consults no one but himself and wishes to stifle all opinion opposed to his own." Irish colleague on the right is Cardinal Michael Nugent, an Ulsterman from Carrigard, County Donegal, very much pro-Empire and committed to providing Catholic chaplains to Irish units in the field to provide spiritual assistance to the soldiers. And both men worked well together to ensure sufficient chaplains were provided to the army. In August 1914, at the beginning of the war, there were 117 Army chaplains, 17 of them were Catholic. So these two men basically ran the show, and this is the operations manager. This is the Reverend Bernard Stephen Rawlinson, and he's a Benedictine. His letters, Benedictines, the letters OSB, immediately after their name, and they're sometimes known as the Black Monks due to the colour of their habits. They follow a life of contemplation. They're involved in education and missionary work. He had served in the Boer War with the Royal Irish Regiment, and he was appointed in 1915 as Principal Catholic Chaplain to the British Armies when he was aged 50. And he held that post right throughout the war. So he was basically the go-to man for priests in the field. Any issues they had, they went to the Reverend Rawlinson. What about the Navy? Whilst the Army was very progressive, the Navy was positively archaic, mainly down to historical bigotry and ignorance. And it was a situation that was never satisfactorily resolved throughout the war. The situation was so bad at the turn of the century that ship surgeons carried out funeral services for Catholic sailors. In 1904, Cardinal Nugent advised Catholic parents not to allow their children to join the Navy until suitable arrangements made for their spiritual needs. At the outbreak of war, there were 223 Anglican chaplains in the Royal Navy. 5 were Catholic. So it's fairly ironic that the first chaplain of any faith to die in the Great War was a Catholic. This is a gentleman here, pictured. He's Canon Robert Basil Gwyder, a Benedictine. He was born in 1867 at Carden Abbey, County Longford, where his father was a surgeon. He was a professor of classics and was appointed as canon of the Diocese of Newport in 1914, and had volunteered at the outbreak of war, being accepted as an acting Navy chaplain based at Queensferry near Edinburgh. The 30th of October 1914, he was aboard Her Majesty's Hospital ship Rohilla, which is pictured here, and it was on a voyage from Queensferry to Dunkirk to pick up casualties, and it ran aground in a storm near Whitby. Canon Gwyder went below deck to attend to a crew member who had broken a leg, and he was drowned when the ship broke up in the storm. Of the 229 on board, 85 were lost. There was an Anglican chaplain on board, but he decided to save himself. He was basically sacked. There's a very interesting book on the sinking, if anybody's interested. It's called Into the Maelstrom by a guy called Colin Britton. It's very interesting because the lifeboats and all went out and tried to save people in a raging storm. So it's a very good story. By another coincidence, the first chaplain of any denomination to be killed in action was also Catholic and of Irish parentage. And he was killed in action on the first day of the invasion of Gallipoli. Reverend William Finn. He was born in Hull in 1876, but both his parents were from Achamore in County Mayo. Pre-war, William was a priest in the parish of Thirsk in North Yorkshire. He applied for appointment as a chaplain in January 1915 and was appointed to the 1st Battalion Royal Dublin Fusiliers at the end of that month. On the 25th of April 1915, he landed with the 1st Battalion Royal Dublin Fusiliers from the SS River Clyde. You see in the picture. River Clyde was a collier requisitioned by the Navy and was to be beached, and the troops of the 1st Royal Dublin Fusiliers, 1st Munsters and the Hampshire Regiment were to surprise the Turkish defenders by emerging from holes cut in the side of the ship and rush via gangways to the beach. The plan failed at the first hurdle. The Turks and their German advisors were aware of the strategic importance of the beach and had constructed barbed wire entanglements underwater and reinforced the hills overlooking the beach with machine guns. River Clyde also beached 80 yards out, and it took time to get the pontoons along which the men would rush onto the beach into position, so any element of surprise was lost. As he disembarked, troops came under withering machine gun fire, and whilst many were shot, many drowned, encumbered by heavy equipment. Reverend Finn was told to stay on board but he said the priest's place was beside the dying soldier. As he disembarked, he was wounded 3 times in the chest, thigh, and right arm. So when he reached the beach, he had to lift his right arm with his left to minister to the dying. Whilst doing this, he was killed by shrapnel from a shell. He's buried at V Beach Cemetery in Cape Helles, Gallipoli, in a joint grave with Lieutenant Colonel Richard Alexander Ruth, who was the commanding officer of the 1st Royal Dublin Fusiliers, who was killed alongside him. William Finn's brother was a master stevedore at Hull. He later became the Lord Mayor of Hull, and he raised funds for the Sacred Heart Catholic Chapel at Skullcoats, which was being built, and he dedicated it to his brother William. This is quite a famous painting. I'm not sure the artist's name. I think it's Fernerino, but it's called The Last Absolution of the Munsters at the Rue du Bois on the 8th of May 1915. And that's on the eve of the Battle of Ober's Ridge. And the next day, the Munsters had 392 casualties. And the priest who's on the horse is Father Francis Gleeson. And he said after the battle, "It was so sad to see scores of dead lying in the cemetery awaiting burial. There in the twilight and after the din of battle had ceased, all was so mournful, so awful. We went to the trenches and I read the service over all the bodies and blessed graves." He stayed with the Munsters, and after the action of the Battle of Loos in September 1915, he wrote to Reverend Rawlinson and said, "I can't stand it any longer," and he was relieved. He got sent home. He'd done his bit. This gentleman is the Reverend Stuart Phelan, and he's OMI, his order, who are called the Oblates of Mary Immaculate. It's an order was founded in France in the early 1800s. Their principal activity is ministering to the poor and undertaking missionary work. So, the guy from the orders again. He was born in 1879 in Dingle, County Kerry. His father was a lighthouse keeper there. He was ordained in 1903, and he was working in a parish in Leeds at the outbreak of the war. And he joined the Navy as a chaplain in late 1914. And he was a Roman Catholic chaplain aboard HMS Black Prince, which is pictured here, a dreadnought of the 1st British Cruiser Squadron. The Battle of Jutland, 31st of May 1916, the Black Prince became detached from the British fleet and approached a line of ships in the fog, believing them to be British, but they were in fact German. The Black Prince ran the gauntlet of the entire German fleet, got torn apart by heavy shells, and finally exploded. It was lost with all hands, 857 men, including Father Phelan, and they're all commemorated in the Portsmouth Navy Memorial. Now, chaplains differed from other officers in the army. They were appointed on a yearly contract, which could be extended yearly on application. What sort of men were they looking for? The Tablet, which is the Catholic Journal, ran an article. Priests between 30 and 40, not afraid of some rough and tumble, with perhaps an adventurous vein in their composition, and with plenty of zeal and sympathy would be most suitable. Riders and good horsemasters rather than ponderous theologians and professors. Though indeed, these would have much to learn and would profit greatly from the experience. Basically, anybody. The chaplains arriving in France were a reflection of priests from across Britain and Ireland, evangelical, educational, monastic, scientific, day-to-day parish types. And whilst the rigours in the field appealed to younger, vigorous types, all had a part to play, and they all had to go through a medical before being appointed, see if they were fit for the job. However, all were human, and in my research, I found that most excelled. Some were badly affected by the rigours of war, such as Father Gleeson, who could not continue. A few succumbed to drink, and a few were sent home through other disciplinary issues. And this is the youngest Irish priest to die on the left-hand side. The Reverend Vincent OSullivan from Killarney. He'd been a teacher at St. Brendan's in Killarney prior to being appointed as a chaplain in February 1916. He was killed in action on the 5th of July 1916 with the 8th Battalion Loyal North Lancashire Regiment, aged 26. He was refused permission to accompany the men on the 1st of July, but the commanding officer relented on the 3rd of July. And on the 5th, the battalion war diary recorded, on the afternoon of 5th inst, the chaplain attached to this battalion Reverend Father D. OSullivan, was killed by a shell outside the advanced dressing station of 75th Field Ambulance. This is a loss which both officers and men of the battalion will feel deeply. He's buried at Bosancourt Communal Cemetery. And the oldest, that's a really poor photograph, but it's Reverend Lawrence O'Day from Kilkenny, and you can see the letters OSFC after his name. That stands for the Order of St. Francis and Clare. It's a Franciscan religious order, adherents of St. Francis of Assisi. They work among the poor and carry out missionary work. Reverend O'Day was born in Kilkenny in 1851. He became a Franciscan in 1868 and served in India for a number of years. The outbreak of war was at a presbytery in Midhurst in Sussex. He was appointed as a chaplain in July 1915 when he was aged 64. Because of his age, he was appointed as a chaplain to a military convalescent camp at Eastbourne. He became ill and died of pneumonia on the 4th of November 1917. He's commemorated on the Kilkenny Great War Memorial. Now, shortage of priests continued right throughout the war. In February 1916, Cardinal Bourne wrote to Cardinal Logue asking for more priests as chaplains. The Irish hierarchy issued an appeal for 20, but within a month they had 36. With the notable exception of Bishop O'Dwyer of Limerick, who held strong nationalist views, the Irish bishops were generally supportive. One of the 36 commissioned at that time was Reverend Stephen Clark, 28-year-old farmer's son from Tevercher in County Meath, appointed in March 1916. He was killed in action 4th of October 1917 at the Battle of Broodseinde, whilst attached to the 9th Battalion Lancashire Fusiliers. Both he and the battalion medical officer were killed by the same shell and of no known grave. They're both commemorated in the Tyne-Cotton Memorial. Now, this plaque is inside the chapel at St Mary's, Brusky, County Cavan, where Stephen was a curate between 1913 and 1916. And it's the only memorial to a fallen priest that I know of in any Catholic church in Ireland, north or south. Very interesting man, this. And there's another who answered Cardinal Logue's appeal, the Reverend Thomas Francis Duggan. He was born in 1890 at Bundero in County Cork. Both his parents were school teachers. Between 1915 and 1917, he was a postgraduate student at Maynooth and was aware of Cardinal Logue's appeal, and he applied. As rationale, he stated this: my generation of Maynooth embraced the ideals of Easter Week 1916 with 100% fervour. This did not prevent us from becoming chaplains in the British Army. In the First World War, there were well over 100,000 Irish Catholics in the fighting ranks. Everyone admitted that these boys were spiritually intractable to anyone save an Irish priest. Hence, when Cardinal Logue issued a special appeal for Irish chaplains, I volunteered. And I went off to France with the blessing and encouragement of every friend I had in senior Sinn Féin circles in Dublin. And he served 3 Irish regiments: 1st Battalion Royal Munster Fusiliers, 1st Battalion Royal Dublin Fusiliers, and the Connaught Rangers. And he was captured on the 22nd of March 1918 during his German Spring Offensive, as you can see on the map, at Saint-Emily, whilst he was with the Munster Fusiliers, and he was held at Mainz prisoner of war camp. Following his release, he was repatriated in 1919, and he returned to parish life in Cork and actively supported Republicans. He attended Tom Barry's wedding and was a confidant of Michael Collins. He was fairly high up, he was fairly well got in the Republican movement. In the Irish Civil War, he saw his role as that of a peacemaker between the warring factions. In 1939, the outbreak of the Second World War, he was appointed as a chaplain again. The upper age limit for chaplains was 40. Tom was 49. He was appointed on the proviso that he served on hospital ships, but he wasn't having any of that. He had had a connection with the Durham Light Infantry from the Great War, and he wangled an appointment with them and served with the 8th Battalion, the Durham Light Infantry. And he was awarded the Military Cross in the retreat to Dunkirk. The citation states, for gallantry in the regimental aid post during heavy bombardment, his coolness, energy, courage, and example were outstanding and helped maintain morale when the regimental aid post was heavily shelled and was full of wounded. He was successfully evacuated from Dunkirk and became the head chaplain of the British forces in Northern Ireland, based at Palace Barracks in Holywood. He was awarded the OBE by King George VI in the New Year's Honours List in 1946. And he returned to life as a parish priest in Ballypehane, which is a suburb of Cork. His adventurous spirit again came to the fore. In 1961, he applied for a position as a missionary in Lima in Peru, aged 71. This was to be his final adventure. He died there on 17th of December, 1961. There's a book about his life, which is again an excellent read. It's called In Peace and War by Dr. Cartha McCarthy. I would encourage anybody, if they're interested, to read it. Decorations for gallantry, such as those awarded to Reverend Tom Duggan, were rarely sought, but they were valued immensely when they were awarded. No Victoria Crosses were awarded to any Irish Catholic chaplains. In fact, only 3 chaplains received Victoria Crosses, all Church of England. However, the Irish chaplains carried out similar, if not greater, acts of valour and did not receive the highest award. The gentleman photographed here is probably the best known, Father Willie Doyle, SJ, so he was a Jesuit. He was killed in action whilst attached to the 8th Battalion Royal Dublin Fusiliers at the Battle of Langemarck. He was actually killed on the 16th. The telegram states 17th, but I can prove he was killed on the 16th. The advance commenced at 4:45 a.m. and stalled almost immediately, and the attacking Irish troops were subjected to a ferocious German counterattack. It was in this counterattack, most likely late morning of 16th of August, that Willie was killed as he went to the assistance of 2 officers who were severely wounded. The Battalion War Diary records 2nd Lieutenants Marlowe and Green, Father Doyle, were killed in the dugout in front of the Black Line. 2nd Lieutenant Charles Dwyer Marlowe was aged 22. He was from Oldcastle in County Meath. 2nd Lieutenant Arthur Vivian Green was 21 and from Holland Park in Belfast. And he had served on the staff of the Bank of Ireland in Londonderry before the war. Aged 44 and from Duffy, County Dublin, the Reverend Doyle was already the holder of the Military Cross. And he was recommended for the Victoria Cross by his battalion commander, by the brigade commander, and by the divisional commander, Major General Bernard Hickey, for his actions in August 1917. However, the award was not made. It was said in 1920 by Professor Alfred O'Rahilly that the Victoria Cross was not awarded due to the triple disqualification of being an Irishman, a Catholic, and a Jesuit. However, I think this rather simplifies matters. Many people performed duties which merited a Victoria Cross, and it was never awarded. The 16th Irish Division and the 36th Ulster Division attacked together at Langemarck, and they were unfairly criticised by General Sir Hubert Gough, the commander of the 5th Army and himself an Irishman, for their efforts. It may have been that the recommendation was never going to get past him. There's no doubt that Reverend Doyle was exceptionally brave, and this was recognised by all who came in contact with him. A soldier from the 36th Ulster Division said, Father Doyle was a good deal among us. We couldn't possibly agree with his religious opinions, but we simply worshipped him for other things. He didn't know the meaning of fear, and he didn't know what bigotry was. The Ulster men felt his loss more keenly than anybody, and none were readier to show their respect to the dead hero priest than our Ulster Presbyterians. Father Doyle was a true Christian in every sense of the word, and a credit to any religious faith. Father Doyle and the 2 second lieutenants have no known grave, and are commemorated on the Time-Cut Memorial to the missing. There's another man who it was reckoned that he should have been awarded the Victoria Cross, Father Simon Stockton. The cutting is from the Daily Sketch of the 10th of August, 1917. Father Rawlinson was of the opinion that he should have been awarded the Victoria Cross, and he's another exceptionally brave man in the mould of Father Doyle. And interesting, though, despite the headline, he wasn't Irish. His mother, Teresa, was born in Dublin, but Frank, as he was initially known, was born in Jersey in 1858. And he was ordained in the order of Discalced Carmelites. So the Carmelites split, you've calced and discalced Carmelites, which is fairly difficult to explain, but the Discalced Carmelites were founded in Mount Carmel in the Holy Land around the 1200s, 12th century, 13th century, and they served God through prayer and spirituality So after their name, they'll have the letters OCD, which is maybe a bit difficult nowadays. He was ordained at Ghent in Belgium in 1883, and he took the name Simon Stock after a 13th century English prior of the Carmelite order. He was never in great health, but he found his niche. Another man found his niche in military life. He was appointed as chaplain to the 6th Enniskillen Dragoons in the Boer War, where he was very highly regarded by his colonel, who later became Field Marshal Edmund Allenby. He was appointed chaplain in October 1914 and was attached to the 1st Battalion Irish Guards, 1st Battalion Royal Irish Rifles, and then the 2nd Battalion Irish Guards. Whilst he was attached to the Royal Irish Rifles, an officer was quoted, "The Reverend Knapp has faced death at least 40 times since we came out. No other clergyman have I seen in the front trenches but him, hearing confessions with bullets and showers like hailstones passing over the heads of the penitents and the confessor. This is what makes soldiers fight well and die calm." He was awarded, or he was mentioned dispatches on the 1st of January 1916 and awarded the Military Cross in the same month. 29th of May 1917, he was mentioned dispatches again. 4th of June 1917, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Order for repeated acts of gallantry. 31st of July 1917, the opening day of the Third Battle of Ypres, or Passchendaele as it's more commonly known, he sustained severe abdominal injuries from shell fire whilst attending to the wounded at the battalion's advanced dressing station near Bosinga. He succumbed to wounds the next day at number 47 Casualty Clearing Station, and he's buried at Dosingham Military Cemetery. It's an interesting case. Reverend Miguelbergen, SJ, Jesuit again. He was born near Rossgrey in Tipperary in 1879, and he joined the Jesuit Syrian mission in Beirut in 1899, becoming fluent in French and Arabic. At the outbreak of war, he was interned by the Turks to Syria, and then he was expelled to Egypt. While he was there, he became acquainted with the Australian troops preparing for Gallipoli. And when they left in May 1915 for Gallipoli, he accompanied them. He didn't have an actual position, he just went with them. At the time, he had applied for commission as an Australian chaplain, but he hadn't been appointed. And as you can see from the attestation, he was actually appointed at Anzac Cove in Gallipoli on the 12th of July 1915. Whenever they left Gallipoli and went to France, he went with the 3rd Australian Division, and he was promoted to chaplain 3rd class. Most chaplains would start off as chaplain 4th class, which is equivalent to captain. So 3rd class is equivalent to a major. And he was appointed chaplain 3rd class in July 1916. On the 11th of October 1917, he was struck by shrapnel at an advanced dressing station of 3rd Australian Field Ambulance during the Battle of Broodseinde, and he died the next day. He is posthumously awarded the Military Cross for distinguished service in the field. He's revered as an Australian war hero. He never set foot in Australia. Here we have an unfortunate story. This gentleman was born James Meehan in Ennis, County Clare in June 1867. He adopted the name Isidore James O'Meehan, and he was a Franciscan, so OSFC after his name. And he joined the Franciscans, and he became a professor at the Franciscan College at Abbeylands in Westmeath in 1901. He was appointed as a chaplain in May 1915 and posted to number 16 Casualty Clearing Station at Sheikh Saad, Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq. You can see it on the right of the map there. And he remained there throughout the war until after the armistice, when he was attached to number 32 Base Hospital at Amara. On the 19th of December 1919, Isidore was out in the River Tigris in a launch duck shooting with a colleague from the Royal Army Service Corps. As they returned to the dock and were getting out of the boat, Reverend O'Meehan sustained an accidental gunshot wound to his left thigh. He was immediately transported to number 21 Indian General Hospital at Amara for treatment. But unfortunately, his life could not be saved, and he died on the same date. He's buried at Amara War Cemetery. And here's a local man to me. He's Reverend Walter Philip Montague, SJ, again a Jesuit. He's born at Ackerton, Port Stuart, and he was the son of a lieutenant in the Royal Navy. He was educated at Stonyhurst College in Lancashire, which is an exclusive Jesuit college, and he became a teacher. And he applied for a commission late in the war in May 1918. He was appointed and was attached to 22nd Brigade Royal Garrison Artillery. and he was badly injured by shrapnel during shelling on 28th of October 1918, and he was taken to number 45 Casualty Clearing Station at a Point. His parents were sent a telegram, said he'd been badly injured, and they requested a chance to visit him, but the request was turned down by the War Office as it was too dangerous for him to travel. He died on the 31st of October, 2 weeks before the end of the war, and this is his grave at Mount St Military Cemetery, which I've had the honour of visiting. He's commemorated on the Port Stuart War Memorial on the seafront, if anybody's passing that way, and they can check that out. Some figures. So during the Great War, 810 Catholic chaplains served in the armed forces. You can see that the breakdown there. 36 were killed in action or died of wounds. And that works out at just under 5% of general population of chaplains were killed. 197 chaplains of Irish extraction served, and you can see 24 killed in action with British, 2 Australian, 2 New Zealand. And that works out at just over 14% were killed. Brave men who intentionally put themselves in harm's way to administer to the wounded and dying.